So in this video, what we're going to do is make a responsive website just using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then we're going to convert it into a React website to show you kind of how to look and think of normal websites, at least hopefully mine are normal, and then how to translate those into a small React project. And what we're going to be doing is basing around this Chuck Norris API that makes Chuck Norris jokes. And if you have no clue what the heck they are, just know we're calling to an external service. So even if you find the jokes terrible, which I do, it's still a great learning experience. Let's see here. I already have the server going. If you don't have a server on Visual Studio Code, that is fine. You could just open up this index file inside of a browser, but every time you make a change, you have to go in and click refresh. So I'm going to come in here and use this Emmet tool, which is just abbreviation. So I'm going to hit the exclamation point, going to hit enter. And now I have this. And I do Chuck Norris joke API website thing. So I click save and obviously nothing happened. All right, cool. Just wanted to double check my technology there real quick because sometimes stuff goes a little bit sideways. And what you see here before I continue any farther is you see I have index.html, this file. I have style.css, and then I have index.js. And you know, these two are blank right here because we haven't written anything. So let's come in and do the, actually, I always want to do style, but that's wrong. So I have this right here. So now I'm going to be bringing in the CSS actually. And if you notice, I also have an assets folder because images are important, right? Because you don't want everything to be text. Sometimes it's easier to convey stuff with a picture. And I found this Chuck Norris picture online, and that's what we're using. So now that we have this, let's come inside the body. It gives ourselves some space. And what we're going to do first is simply just write out all of the HTML. Then we're going to jump a little into the JavaScript because we have to dynamically make part of our website. And I'm going to explain why we have to when we get to that point. And then after that, it's just going to be CSS the entire way down. So I'm going to do div dot header wrapper. And right there, anytime you see me do like div dot or something dot, it's just Emmet shorthand. It comes with Visual Studio Code. I highly recommend looking it up because it increases your speed at which you could code. I wouldn't say drastically, but it makes you much more efficient. So then we're going to come in here. We have this header banner, and we're going to call this Chuck Norris joke generator. Go ahead and save that. Okay. Live server is supposed to be live, but sometimes I even have to hit refresh. And what I'm doing is I'm in the dev tools. So you just go to a website in Chrome. I think most browsers will work like this. You click inspect, and then I'm choosing the XR dimensions here because I want to start on mobile first and work my way up. I find it's less CSS I have to write, and it's more efficient. And like, was it 80% or some wild number of web traffic is through phones. So you want to start with phones first. So now that I have that, I have the header wrapper, and now let's go ahead and do kind of the body wrapper. So div dot body wrapper, we have that in there. So now what I want to do is I want to have the image of Chuck Norris come on in. And I'm going to go into assets and then Chuck. And I have Chuck Norris, the man, right here. So I'll save this, and we have Chuck Norris right here. Howdy, partner. You know, got that cowboy hat on. I guess that's what they say. I don't live in Texas. I think that's where he's from. I don't know how they speak down there. So we're going to make another div. We're going to do the body joke area. And we got that there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add an ID in here, a body joke area. And I'm going to have this be, and there's probably other ways to handle this too, so don't take everything I say or really any tutorial as gospel, as a non-breaking space. And this is because later on what we're going to want to do is put our jokes that we get from our API call, we're going to want to write over them right here. But I just kind of want something there. At least when I was coding this up, it made sense to me to do it that way. If it doesn't for you and it doesn't bother you, then leave it out. So we're still inside the body wrapper right here. We just got done doing the body joke area. So the next thing we want to do is do a body button wrapper. And once again, these are my naming schemes. If you want to change them up as you see fit, go for it. So then inside of here, since I have the wrapper, what I want to do is put a button in here. I'm going to call it the body joke button. And then I want to do a get joke right here. And then I'm going to want to add an ID to this because I'm going to use an event listener later on. I'm going to call this joke button. And because we already know when we're already using the picture and we have the index and stuff here to the side, I have my files up here. I'm going to close that to give us more real estate so it's easier to see, you know, everything. So now as I scroll down here, I'm still within the div, but I'm outside of the, you know, the wrapper right here for the joke button. But what I want to do is I want to come in and I want to do a div, and I want to do this for my radio buttons I'm going to have. And I'm going to discuss that in just a minute. So I have that, and then I want to put an ID of body radio wrapper. And this is important because what I want to do is get from the API, there's categories that you could get, and I want to get those categories and I want to put them in my app. So when a user comes in and says, I want a sports Chuck Norris joke or a food-based Chuck Norris joke, there's a lot of categories, they will be able to just click it and then get joke, and it's a bit more customized for them. So I'm not going to write out all the radio buttons. We're going to populate them dynamically. And so I'm going to have a script in here, and I have the source be, let's do this, index.js. So we have get joke. This is everything we have from the HTML. So we're essentially done with that unless I've done some kind of typo, which is always fun to see people make on tutorials. So now what I should be doing is going from our index file here to create now our fetch categories. And so I'm going to just do this just for note-taking visualization. So fetch categories for UI. So I'm going to do an async function. I'm going to call this fetch categories. And you don't have to do it all in index.js. You can make external JavaScript files and then import them in using, I think it's like the type equals module. You know, if you added like a type in here, and I think if you typed module, I believe I'd have to look it up real quick because it's one of those things that I know you could do. I just forgot the exact wording. You could import stuff in and out of your JavaScript files to keep it organized, but I don't have a lot of code, so I'm just writing it like this. So I have an async function. I have fetch categories, and inside what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the response coming back, and I want to await, which means I'm going to hang out right here until I get whatever it is I want back. And let's put a fetch in front of this. And I'm going to copy this off screen just because it's just easier. And you could pause or go to my code because the link in the description has all of my code. So as you can see right here, this is the URL for getting the categories. And then what I want to do is get the data. And then I want to return the data. And so I'm awaiting this fetch right here. And then what I'm doing right here is taking the response that I am getting and I'm just turning it into JSON. So then when I use it later, or really in just a moment, what I can do is simply just parse through it. So here I'm gonna, let's see, load jokes on load. And so this is when the website loads up. What I'm gonna want to do is have this fire automatically. I don't want the user to do anything. I want this part to be for them, because if we look at the UI, how do they know? Click to get categories. Like, that's an extra thing they shouldn't have to do, right? So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to do this outside here just because I don't want to forget it. Current category, and I'm just going to set it to a default to dev because that's one of the categories. So now that I have this right here, what I'm going to do is do a window on load. It's going to be an async function because what I'm firing off on the inside is going to be async here. It's going to be a nameless function. So we just need it to do something. We don't care about the actual name of it. And then we do a const body radio wrapper. And we'll do a document dot get element by ID. And that's why we created the IDs. And we're going to do a body radio wrapper. So now what this is doing is getting the body radio wrapper, which is this right here. Actually, it's really, I mean, it's the whole thing, but it's getting it by this right here. So it's grabbing this, like literally this whole thing right here. And it's stored inside of here. So we can inspect it, change things, do manipulations. And what we're going to want to do is add stuff to it. So now what we want is data. And I could tell you, and you can look yourself by going to the documentation, and that is in the link below for the Chuck Norris thing. But this data coming back is going to be an array. I could tell you because I've done this. You know, I made it this video, or I made the code before I made this video. So now I know data is an array. So what I want to do is parse over it. So I'm going to do a data array dot from, and then I have data coming in. I'm going to do a for each on here, and this is a category. So now I got this rolling, and each category is going to be something inside of the actual array coming back. So it's each little piece. So dev is definitely going to be one of them because I've already looked inside of it. And so this is the part where I want to add on to this thing right here you can't see. Now it's upset because this, you know, I'm coding the JavaScript and all that other jazz. But what I want to do is take all the individual categories and I want to nest them in between or inside here. I want them to be children of the body radio wrapper right there. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a radio document. I'm going to create an element. It's going to be an input. And let's see here. what I should do first, actually. What I should do, because I'm looking at my code now and I realize there's a slight change I need to make here. And that's what I do is I'm going to call this a, so if this body radio wrapper, I'm going to call this a, category wrapper. Because what I'm going to want to do is, since I'm going to be making an input and a label, I'm going to want to put them in the div, and then each div I'm going to want to put inside of this. That way everything is kind of housed together correctly, and I'll show you in a moment. So now that we have that, let's come down here and start updating this now. So now I have a type. The radio type is going to be a radio. Just give it the name of category. Because that way, if they all have the same name, you could only click one. Otherwise, you could click multiple radio buttons at the same time, and it just doesn't make sense. Then we'll do radio dot value equals I think I just set all of these to category. I also was playing with GitHub Copilot, so it did kind of just throw these ideas out here. So some of them just ran with, and I was fine with it. And then class name is going to be body radio button. Cool. And on each of them, I want to add an event listener. So when you click, something happens. So I'm going to do radio.add event listener. And this is going to be a clicking event. We have this fat arrow function in here. Going to come on in. And the current category, which is this thing up here, I want to change. And I'm going to get that from the event target dot ID. Actually, typos, because this is going to be stringly typed as just the word category. This is actually going to be the name coming on in. So if it's dev, the value is going to be dev, and the ID is going to be dev, or, you know, food or whatever it is. So these are going to be more dynamic. And so, yeah, I'm just going to update the current category with whichever one I click on with its ID. So that's pretty cool there. So then what I want to do next is I want to get the category wrapper, and then I want to append a child. I want to append the radio. So now that's done. That's cool. So then the next thing I want to do is work on the label. So I'm going to do a const label equals document dot create element label. And it's the same thing as above. I'm creating an input, and now I'm just creating a label. So I'm doing a label. I'm doing let's see, an HTML4 category, so they match up. I want the label and the HTML4 to refer to the correct category. And if you don't know, follow along and then just look at the HTML and like just take some time to focus on it. Not every tutorial you look at, you're just going to get it right away, or it's going to soak in. It may just magically work, right? Because you're following what we're doing, but take some time to like get to really know the code even after you do this. Label.enter HTML is going to be category, because I want them to know what they're clicking on, because this is the label. And then what I want to do is I want to do the category wrapper append child, So now inside of this div, I've appended the input. Now I'm going to append the label. So now what I want to do is I want to take, let's see here. I want to take the body radio wrapper. And let's do an append child. And I want to add the category wrapper. So once again, this body radio wrapper is up here, which is this. And I'm going through and I'm saying, all right, every time I start, on the next index, I want to create a div, and that input, I want to add it inside of this div. And then as a sibling item, I want to add the label in as well. And then when that's all done, I want to add the category wrapper, the input and labels parent, into here. So this should hopefully get us what we want. Let me refresh this. Actually, this thing's been weird lately. Let me do that. And then we'll inspect. And then hopefully we'll see it work here. Oh, so what happened is I actually have a typo here. So let me go ahead and refresh this. So now, okay, it works. Awesome. So now what we see here, and let me close this out because, like I said, Chrome has been really strange lately. So now I get all of these. I get joke, which is a dead button right now. And you can see animal, career, dev, explicit, fashion, food, all of this stuff I'm getting. So I'm going to drop this down right here. And body radio wrapper. I now have all these divs like I made. And now I have a radio and a label like that. So that's pretty cool. So what I'm going to do next is, let's see here. I think what I'm going to do next is just go ahead and hook up the button to get the joke. It's all going to look terrible for now, but as we go along with the CSS, it'll look much better. So what I want to do is I want to, let's see here, fetch single joke. And so this is going to be an async function. Fetch joke. We're going to use the current category. This is a convenient designator name, but since I want this specifically to go in here, right? This is me just kind of hinting, hey, you're going to use this category. And so I'm going to do a const response equals await. And what I'm going to do now is copy and paste this off the screen because it's just, I don't want to type it all out again. And now I have this. And you notice these backticks. You may have never seen them before. And all this represents is that it's a string, but it's a kind of string that allows us to put variables on the inside. So when we use this function down below, when we go to make our call, what's going to happen is whatever, this value is based upon when I, click something, as this changes and then I go to use this and it intakes it as a value, if I click, it's going to take a minute, or it may just be bombing out for some odd reason. So as I'm going through and let's see here. Oh, I probably didn't. There we go. So if I click religion, right? This current category is going to be religion. So when I fire this joke off later, it's going to get, it's going to go through here, but this is going to change to religion. Cool. So let me make sure, let me just minimize this right here. Fetch joke. What did I call this? Fetch single joke function, just so things are named a bit more appropriately so they make sense. So now what I want to do is I want to get the the joke button. Document dot get element by ID, and we're gonna be getting the joke button. And the joke button is, where did I put it? Here we go. Body joke button. All right, so okay, so joke button, yes, okay, cool. The ID is slightly different than the class, but that's fine for this example. So I'm getting this entire button by this ID right here. So I'm capturing it, that whole HTML element. So then joke button dot add event listener, and you guessed it, it's going to be a click. Be an async function because we're going to use the function that we used above to do this. And then the const value, we're going to do a fetch joke, and it's going to take the current category. And then we're going to get the, we're going to make a const here, which is just a constant, meaning we can't, change the value after we've made it. The joke text. And what we want to do is we want to get that area, that non-breaking space. We want to update it now. So body joke area. So now we're coming into here. And this is it. We're getting the body joke area, this whole thing here, and we're going to overwrite what is right here. So the next line is, so we're fetching it. Actually, we have to put await in front. And then we're going to get the, that's not what I wanted. That was some autocomplete I did not want. Joke text dot enter HTML. And we just want to blank it out. So give it an empty string. But then immediately after that, we want to, in the inner HTML, give it the value. So we have this right here. We have the response, and actually we are not even quite done with that yet. There was that error I was trying to fix. So we have the response. We're going to be getting the data. Await response.json. So we want to make it easy for us to parse out and work with. We want to return the data dot value, and the value itself is the joke. How do I know? I've gone to the website. I've played with this API. I'll show you it works. So now, as long as I didn't nuke anything, this should work. Unless I have some kind of typo somewhere. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click get joke, and something should appear just below Chuck Norris. Right now it's by default dev. So I'm just going to click get joke. And we see we got the joke from another website, another source, an API somewhere out there in the interwebs with not a lot of lines of code. The joke is Chuck Norris's keyboard doesn't have a control key because nothing controls Chuck Norris. Yeah, these are all the jokes. These are all the jokes, and they're stupid. And that's funny. So what we want to do now is, since we have all of our JavaScript done, we don't have to worry about this anymore. If you think, Mark, this looks like crap, feel free to come here and clean it up, right? This is a tutorial. This is a demonstration. If you're working with a team doing stuff at a company, you're gonna do things a little bit differently. So now I'm gonna come in here and style CSS, and this is cool because we have the index, which is done. We have the index.js, which is done. Now we just have to make this thing look, kind of good looking, right? So let's get started. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this off screen. I'm going to paste this in here just so when I have my sidebar here, even if it's not a ton of CSS, you eventually get to a gazillion lines, and you want to, if you're doing it all in one file, that is, you're going to want some kind of bookmarking to know where certain stuff is happening. So I may be bouncing around a little bit here. So what I'm going to come and do is I'm going to do HTML body. I'm going to do margin 0, and then I'm going to do padding remove my all caps, 0. And did I nuke something? Oh, did I? Yes, I did. This is what happens sometimes when you jump from one language to another. You just slight syntax differences there. So now I want to come in. I want to start giving the body some color, because as cool as white is, you know, there's other cool colors out there. So I'm going to copy and paste this off screen onto here because I just want to, and typing this stuff out is kind of annoying. So now I have this, and once again, starting on mobile, it may not be the most perfect mobile layout, but like I said, feel free to update this as you see going along. So I have the Chuck Norris joke generator. I got this neato color here. So let's just come on through and, you know, start putting some stuff together. So now that I have the body, what I'm going to start with is the header wrapper, the class, right? And you may notice, and hopefully your CSS does this, is that I like to start from the top down, right? If I do the body radio wrapper and then I come up and then do the header wrapper below where the body stuff is in the CSS, you have no clue where anything is. So stay organized, and my advice is to always work top down. That way, you know, your JavaScript may always be a little, you know, all over the place because it's serving a different purpose. But I believe your style CSS and your index file should kind of flow together hand in hand. So now that I have the header wrapper, what I want to do is I want to do a display of flex, because I love using flex boxes. We're going to do this as a row, and we're going to justify the content as start. All right, so it doesn't really do a ton right there, but I think you may notice as we get to other screen sizes, you know, bigger visual impacts will occur. So next I want to come in and do the header banner. And once again, I'm going to copy this off screen. It's a background color. And then I think I just did Alice blue because I just wanted a color there. And I'm going to do the, let's see, padding at 10 pixels. And then I want to do a box shadow of, let's see here, 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 10 pixels, 1 pixel, and then this color I have here at the end for the actual shadow itself. So we got this. This looks kind of neat, I think, but the fonts, let's play with this a little bit. So what I'm going to come down here and do is go to the header banner, and I want to change that font size. Let's change this to, let's just do 20 pixels. All right, so now it's a little bit tighter, it's tinier. If you wanted to go up to 25 or whatever it is, whatever you want, it's your app now, right? So now that I have the header banner out of the way, next thing I want to do is go to the body wrapper. You do a display flex again because I want these to flow in a certain way. Going to give that as a column. So you're going to line items, center, justify content, center. So now this looks a little bit better. Everything's kind of nicely centered in here, so we're off to a pretty good start. And then let's work on the body image now. So body, img. So I want this to be a little bit responsive, but not, I don't want to go too crazy with that picture of them. So I'm going to do body width, we'll do 50%, and then we'll do a max width because we don't want to get too big. And I just chose 300 pixels. So It's kind of funny how like the app wraps around his head. But if we, like an iPad Pro or whatever, I don't know. I just wanted that, those styles I think were best for this guy's face. So coming back into the CSS here, let's go to the body joke area here. Got a little bit of a typo. I'm going to do a width of 90% because we don't want it like slapping the outsides of like your phone. So we want a little bit of spacing from the outside. I think the background color, Azure. I'm still working on how to use colors in my career. So if you overall don't like my colors, I apologize. Colors are one of the most inconsequential things compared to, say, padding, margin, all that other stuff. So we have the padding there, we have the margin, and we're going to do 0 pixels and then 10 pixels because we want some space on the left and right there, or coming on out from the sides. Let's do a border of 1 pixel solid black. Also, border 1 pixel solid black and or red is one of my favorite debugging tools in CSS ever. And then I want to do a border radius because I kind of want to, make it not have sharp corners. Actually, let's bump this up to 3 pixels. We're going to do an overflow of Y, and we're going to make it scroll because we don't want a ton of rubber banding, hopefully none. But if there's going to be any overflow, I want it just to scroll. That's it. And then the max height is 100 pixels. So we have this right here. Let's go to science. Cool. Let's try to find a long one. Okay, so that's a shorter one. Some of these get long, so it may not be able to find one right away here. Okay, I don't think any of them are going above 100 pixels, but there are some that go a little bit long, and it may matter when we get to like larger screen sizes and I increase this text here. But yeah, you could also do a min height of 100 pixels, or use a clamp. I think it's called a clamp function. So feel free to play with this as you want to. So now that we have the body joke area done, let's come in here and do the body button, let's see, wrapper. Margin top, and let's give this 50 pixels. All right, cool. So we have a little bit of space here, which is nice. You don't want everything jammed up together. You kind of want things logically to be broken apart. We could see this Chuck Norris joke generator header. We have the picture. Could we give some space between the picture and this below? Yeah, but I don't think it's hurting anything. But we have this piece of functionality that we kind of just want to space out, right? So that looks good. I'm happy with that. And so now that that's out of the way, let's come down here, and after the wrapper, we'll do the body joke button itself. We'll do a margin, margin top of, what was this, 30 pixels I think I had. Actually, I was writing the wrong CSS. Disregard all that I just did. I'm looking off screen. I always have my code off screen, and I was looking at the wrong line. I'm like, this doesn't make sense for what I just did. So width is going to be 100 pixels. Padding is going to be 10 pixels. Let's see. I think the font size, I'm going to keep the same throughout, and it's going to be 17 pixels. Border radius is going to be 10 pixels. And then the text shadow Let's do 0.5 pixels, 0.5 pixels, and then I'm going to copy and paste this on in. So now we have this. Sweet. Looks awesome. So we got that. And let's actually add something here. So I do want to change it a little bit just because I want this to look a little bit, let's see here. Body joke button. Let's come in here. And so the width is 100 pixels. Get joke. I think that looks okay. And let me look at the font size. That doesn't look too bad. And this is at 100%. Let's see. I may actually change my mind on this style. Yeah, I had an iPhone 4. These things are tiny. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. So I'm actually going to go back to the XR. And I'm going to actually remove this style here because we do not need it at all. So that's always good. These things happen too. Like, just because I'm doing a tutorial doesn't mean this doesn't happen when I'm at work, you know. Plus other people on your team may have differing opinions. So we have the body joke button, and then we want to go into the body radio wrapper now. And so margin top, because we want to give stuff breathing room. We want it to logically be grouped together. I'm going to be do a display of flex direction. It's implied that display flex is going to be a row, but I just like to, it doesn't hurt anyone, and if someone's coming in after you or you're looking at your code later, you just read it. I'm going to do a flex wrap because we want it to wrap, and I'm hitting all the wrong auto completes here. Justify content, and then we're going to do center right here. All right, so that looks pretty cool, and that looks pretty okay. I'm not too dissatisfied with it, but let's come into here into the body radio wrapper, and I want to kind of squeeze it in a little bit more, and let's do the width at 90%. There we go. It brings in a little bit more. And I'm not going to keep it like this. I'm actually going to kind of columnize it. But I kind of like the, I don't know, I like breathing space on the left or right hand side if I could get away with it. If it makes sense also, right? So cool. So now that I have the body radio wrapper right there, let's see. Coming on down now, I'm going to have the category container. And let me just double check to make sure I named all this correctly. So I got all of this in here. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to get the body radio or the category container. All right, cool. Sorry, I'm looking at this real quick. So we should be pretty good to go. Let's go ahead and come into here and look at this. So I have the wrapper, but now I have to come into each container. And I think the issue I'm having is each div does not have a class name, which was the suspicious thing to me. And so now what I need to do is give all of these a class name of category container. So that way I could organize them as I need. So how do I do that? I'm going to go to category wrapper dot class name, and I'm going to name this, let's see here, category dot or hyphen. I still think I'm using Emmet category container. So now, it's blowing up on me, right? Once again, there we go. It's just one of those days for Chrome, I guess. So now they all have category hyphen container. So this is good. So now I'm going to come in here. I'm going to get the div that holds the label and the input inside of it. And I'm going to make some changes. So I'm going to do a category container, margin. Let's do 15 pixels on top and bottom, 0 on the left and right hand side. I'm going to do a flex grow of 1. And then let's do a width of 33%. And now we see these things are pretty nicely laid out here. I think that's much better than it was before, right? Now, if we're actually testing this physically on phones like a usability test, and we want people to do that, we may need to make changes, add more spacing, some of that good stuff. But just for now, I think visually for a first, minimum viable product, this looks, to be on track. But one thing I do want to come in here and do in my, my phone view here, which actually, this is actually really funny. This is what happens when you did not get a good night's sleep before. So I've been kind of overwriting my code without knowing it here. So only screen and min width. And so what I'm going to do now is take this and add it in here. Glad I didn't do too many more styles, but once again, do I do this at my job and screw up like this? Yeah. Just got to come back in through and make it right. Sweet. So not a whole lot changed right there. Let me double check this. See, this is 18 now. All right, awesome. The font is bigger on here. And so this is pretty cool. Let's turn it sideways. Looks okay. Maybe be better if it was maybe moved over a little bit when it's in what's it called? Landscape mode. Yeah, landscape mode right here. Maybe we'd want to make some changes in there, but as for right now, for a demo, for a tutorial, I feel okay with what we're doing. I wrote it right. So I'm going to come into here and I'm going to do the tablet view. And keep in mind when I'm doing min width, this is 300 pixels and up. It's going to maintain all of this, all these changes here. And so I'm going to come in and I'm going to copy and paste this in. And so this is from like 768 pixels and up. I'm going to, change some stuff. And it's not a ton, but let's come in and work on the header banner. And what I should do now and what you should do is move this to maybe like an iPad. So now I'm going to go to the header banner. I'm going to do a font size of 35 pixels. All right, doesn't look too bad. 35 pixels, cool. And the next thing I'm going to want to do is go to the body joke area and do a max height. And let's do 150 pixels. We'll do a font size of 25 pixels. And I could do more dynamic stuff, but sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. It's, really about what your product needs and what is best for your end user. My end user is all y'all out there, and that's, I give this to you as future devs and experts to, use as a base to experiment with. So the body joke area. All right, so the text is bigger. That's cool. Awesome. Cool. And once again, we could do like a min height here and just kind of keep it big so it's not rubber banding as much, but I'll leave that up to y'all. So the body joke area, let's go to the body joke button. Let's do a width of 150 pixels. We'll do a font size of 25 pixels. We're going to come back in here. All right, looks better, more readable. So that's really cool. Now let's come into the body radio wrapper. And let's give this a width of, let's say, 80%. And this was me just playing around with it. You don't have to do this exact thing here, but tightens it up a little bit. Once again, there's some like meh, space over here you could do something with. You could shift it over a little bit more, but I'm not too dissatisfied with it right now. We're going to come in and make the labels bigger because those are obviously not up to par. 25 pixels. That's much better. And then lastly, we're going to go to the body radio button, and we're going to do a border. Let's see here. Alrighty. Let's come down in here real quick. Alrighty. That looks good to me, actually. So we have the class name of the body radio button, and actually, you know what? This is what happens when you do some of this stuff, and you have a style that slips past you. This is actually a debugging CSS, so my bad. Let me remove that. I was like, why is this not working the way I thought it would? Because I was using a border for some debugging in some original code. So if I click music, I get a music joke. Who let the dogs out? Chuck Norris let the dogs out, and then Roundhouse kicked them through an Oldsmobile. Actually, one of my parents owned an Oldsmobile when I was a kid. It's a very old car. The word old is in it, and I thought it was old when I was a child. So this is how you make a Chuck Norris responsive website. You could dynamically click these input buttons and then get a customized joke. This is how you make an API call as well. And stick around because I'm going to show you how to convert this into a React project. Alrighty, so in this section now what we're going to do is take the previous project that we did, and to show you it's still here, it's right behind this Visual Studio Code window here, and we're going to convert it into a React application. So the first thing we need is React. So let's go ahead and do that. Do npx create React app, and let's call it Chuck-Norris. You can name it whatever you want to. And if it complains about the name of your project, it'll, well, let you know. So let's go ahead and hit this, and then hopefully do some fancy editing. All right, so now that that's done, what we're going to do is we're going to do cd, which is change directory. We're going to do Chuck Norris. And I'm hitting tab because it knows it has got autocomplete, so it knows where I want to go. So I'm going to do dir. If you're on a Linux or Mac, you do ls. And I want to make sure I'm in it. It's one of those things where I know I am, but I've burned myself a couple times, so I always want to double check. So now that I'm in here, what I want to do is check that. All right, so I'm inside, but I also want to use Axios, which is a way we're going to do our fetching of the API, the categories, and then the joke itself. It's not the only way, but just because I like using different technologies and playing around with stuff. If you have your own methods, feel free to use those, but I'm just going to use this and do npm I Axios. Cool, so now that we have that, we'll do npm start. We're going to hit enter, and it should pop it up in a browser, which I'll bring over. So now I have this right here, and let me pull that all the way down. Why did it come back up? All right, stay right there. Cool. I know this is probably getting cut off a little bit from the graphic, but as long as it's running, you're not really going to need to worry about much here. So we got this thing floating. So what we're going to do first is come in and start gutting some stuff. So we have the app.js. Let me remove that. We have the app.js stuff here. And so I'm going to keep the app.css. You could use index.css to port our old styles on over if you wanted to. This is just a tutorial, but if you have other plans, you might want to be a bit more organized with where you put certain things, right? But I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to pretty much just nuke this and then keep this as my open and close right here. And there's nothing going on there. And I'm going to come into app.css and I'm going to delete all that. And then so what I am going to do is go into my previous style.css with all our good fun stuff here. And I'm going to come in and just paste it straight in and click save. We can see that some of the effects have taken place, but not all of them. I mean, you can see the yellow, it's familiar. So I'm going to come in now, I'm going to make a folder, and I call it assets. And then what I'm going to do is take this picture. I'm going to copy it. This is the one of the Chuck Norris photo. And I'm just going to paste it straight on in here. So now we have that. Then what I want to do next is make a folder called components. And this is going to house our different ideas for our project. So before we had the header, that was a very distinct area. And maybe we could split up the categories from the joke area itself. But what I'm going to do is just kind of combine the whole body in one file, because I think it's okay, you could do that. And then I'm going to keep the header separate, just so it's not, I don't know, it's just how I organize this one. So then inside of the components folder, what I'm going to do is do this, make a file called header, or a folder, I should say, and then make a file called header.js. I'm going to do RFC because I have a coding snippets program plugin thing. And if you go to like React snip or whatever, I'm pretty sure it's this one up here if you want to use it, the ES7 Plus. I use it all the time. I use it at work too. So now that we have this right here, what we want to do is we want to think about what is only going to be in here, and that is just the header stuff, right? So if I come into here, I could really just copy and paste this on out. So I'm going to come in. I could save this. And what I'm going to do now is go into app.js. Since this has export here, I'm going to import it in. So I'm going to come up. I'm not using that. Import header. And it already knows where I want it from. Yours may or may not have good IntelliSense. I don't know what plugins I have that do that for me, or if it's been an update to Visual Studio Code, but I like it. So we're going to do header, and then close itself off right there. And it should, in theory, yep, looks like we got it. So, and because we already know it's responsive, right? I'm not going to start at the phone view, though at the end I'll, show it as I move it around or whatever. So let's go ahead and make our next component. We're going to close this up. And we're going to just call this body, because that was kind of the big idea, at least from the CSS naming. We're going to call this body.js. Is this going to be a little bit bigger of a file? 100%, but what can you do? So first I want to do the import Axios from Axios, because that's how we're going to make our API call to the website itself to get the information. And then I want to import, I'm going to call it Chuck, from, let's see here. I'm going to go into assets / and then we have Chuck right there, which is super cool. So now we have this, and we are going to need to set some variables in here so that we could control stuff like what category is it, like currently the categories in general, and then also like the current joke. So let's go ahead and start using something called useState, which is extremely common when using React. It's basically a way to store and save things as changes get made in your application, or as well as when your application loads, those variables are set with a specific value. So they're extremely handy and useful, and they look a little weird and feel a little weird at first, but after a while they become second nature. So let's do a const We're going to do a category, set category, react.useState. And I do react.useState rather than import, useState up here, which you could do. I just like the verbosity, I think that's the word, right here. And I like to keep this up here as clean as possible. So we're using React dot in front of useState is cool in my book. We're gonna do const current category. Then we do set current category. And you can see a pattern starting to form here, and that is you're going to have your name of something, and then this is the function to change this value, and you just put the word set in front of it. That's pretty much it. It's not one of those, you could probably name it like, banana pudding if you wanted to, but it's just a convention you see everywhere, so you should stick to that convention. And then let's do current joke, set current joke. And we're going to do this, click that button, ... So this is all tightened up here. Let me expand this out a little bit, just so we have a little bit more real estate. I'm going to move this back on over here. So now we have this body in here that we're eventually going to get to. But what we want to do is I just want to go down kind of in order of how I have my code off screen to rather than jumping around a lot. So I have my variables set up here. So what's the next thing I need to do? Well, if you notice that on load, we get the categories, right? There's a lot of things that we do automatically. So how do we mimic that in React? Well, one way we could do that is to do this thing called use effect. And so let's come down and set that up here. So we have React, and then we have use effect, and it looks a little weird. Syntax does look a little strange. So we got that callback going on in there. And then what we're going to do is Axios get, and this is being pulled in from off screen because URLs and background colors, I just don't like adding on in myself. So we have this, which is the categories. This should look incredibly familiar, at least in form. Actually, I'll probably see if it'll let me come down here, and then we'll do then. Set category to response.data. All right, cool. So we got that going on right here. So this is essentially going to be firing off, and let me put this here at the end of it. So if this is empty, this just fires off once. Now, I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this only will fire off once when it loads, when the page loads. So if this was set to any other variables up here that may change, it would fire an update and run every time another variable may change. So if I wanted to, I don't know, if there was category, or if there was, the current joke, if there was something else, some other variable up here I wanted to type in, like current joke, right? Every time current joke changes or something happens to it, this will get kicked off again. But since I'm leaving this parentheses here empty, it's just going off once, which is pretty cool, I think. So what I want to do next is I want to prepare also the joke. So there's the button where we click it and then we end up getting the joke and populating it. So let's go ahead and make that. We're going to call this const get joke. All right, so we're off to a good start here. So we're going to say if the current category is basically just like empty or whatever. And I'm going to copy this in from the other screen here just because it's long to type and I want to save some time. So if it's empty, we're just going to go random. We're going to get a random value and put it in there, right? You know, using this URL. And then whatever the response to that is, I'm going to set the current joke to that value. So this is the response.data.value. If you remember from the last section of this video, value is the joke. So if I want to come back into here, though, I want to have an else. Like, what if there's already, you know, a value, you know, there. And so I'm going to copy and paste this in from off the screen as well, just because I think it'll be, you know, infinitely easier here. And so let's see if this tightens up a little bit here. Funny how that stuff works, huh? The formatting's a little on the wonky side. So let me move this on in a little bit. There we go. That's kind of how I want it to look. Of course, I save it and undoes it for me. So basically what's going to happen is when I click the button to get the joke, it's going to ask, is the current category, you know, empty? And it may only be like that once at the beginning of the app, right? And it will get a random joke, and that's what it's going to go for. But as you set stuff and it saves it in the state, it's going to take whatever value that category is that we click later on and set it to that. So yeah, we're just handling those two scenarios, nothing incredibly special. So now what we want to do is we want to come down and we want to come in here and start doing the fun coding stuff in here. So I don't know why it decides to do this right here. That's one thing about this formatting that I do not like, because I need those open and close parentheses. But what I could do is I could come in here and take this entire body wrapper, and I should be safe for the most part. So come in here, I'm going to click save. And it seems like there's an issue. And the issue is I'm not importing it yet. When you're jumping around between different technologies and you do stupid stuff like that, yeah, let's see if it'll recognize it. There we go, from body. There's times I even forget how to read JavaScript when I've been in Java or other languages, so don't worry about it. All right, so sweet. I have all this stuff right here. And if I come in, one thing I should change immediately is the image, because you see I'm getting this thing called Chuck from up here, which is the path going to that Chuck Norris image that we were using. So to use images in React, all you got to do is just come into here, delete that out, and then use the import name, which is Chuck, and voila, we got that right there, which is super freaking cool, right? But how do we handle the categories stuff? Like, that's kind of weird, right? So one thing that we can do is come in here, and what we do have access to is, I should probably call it categories or something, but what we're going to do is get this is going to be an array, right? We indicate that by this right here. And so this is what's going to be set as our categories coming on in. And in a really efficient way, if you have to make a bunch of, I guess, components in a component, right, is to use a thing called a map. So let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to do category dot map. And all a map is doing is going through an array, and you do some kind of thing, and then it returns like an array back. But in this case, since it's in the UI and the way it works with React and all that, it's really just returning components inside of that array. If that sounds a little weird, when we're done coding this, you'll get a better understanding. We got map. We'll call it cat for category. No, not like that, but okay. And so it's yelling at me, which is fine. So we have these categories right here, and I want to return a component like a div, right? And so how do I end up doing that? What I could do is just do div, and then I could do dot, let's see, body, radio, button. Cool. So now I'm returning this here. And if you notice, this is class name and this is class right here. I'm gonna have to change all these classes, and I probably have to do it in my header too. Yeah, because that slips by me. I have to go through, and I'll do that after I'm done with the map. And I have to switch everything from class to class name, because that's just the syntax when you're using React. So, and I come in here and I do an input. And this should look pretty familiar compared to the code we just did in JavaScript in the standard website. So we're going to do type radio. And if you notice, we're doing it like in the UI, which is kind of neat, right? Before it's in JavaScript, and then we're importing it in, but we're like in the UI doing this kind of stuff. And I don't know, I think it's cool. As long as you're very organized. Our value is going to be whatever the category is. The ID is going to be whatever the category is. And then on click, we had event listeners before. Here we're using on click, which is same thing. When we click it, what happens? We're going to set the current category to whatever the category is. And then we're going to add in here a label. And this is going to be for the category. And this is going to be the category name as well. So click save. And then now we see that we get all of this in here, which is pretty cool, right? And I think there may be a naming difference between the CSS before, so we'll check that out in a minute. But as of right now, this is fine. So I was talking about the class names. So let's do a Control F up here and find everything named class. So we got quite a few in here, and we're going to replace it with class name. I think this is like all of them. All right, so that's cool. We're going to go into header, and we're going to find everything that has class, and then we're going to replace all with class name. Cool. So that looks pretty awesome. And let's see here. Let's go ahead and go. I'm just going to go ahead and do this right here, enter index.css. I'm going to get rid of that just because I don't want to overriding anything. So didn't do that at the beginning, but we're fine now. Just make sure your index.css is deleted because that's being imported, you know, into here. And so you might have overriding of styles, right? And so we have this, and let's come up to here and kind of see what's going on. And so what's interesting is we have this non-breaking space value, right? But we're not updating it the way we were before. We're going to update it and put a value in a different way. And what we're going to do is actually just put in the current joke. And how are we getting the current joke? Set current joke from the get joke function here. So where do we go to hook up that you know, that function? So what we're going to do is do an on click right here. And we're going to do get joke. So we have this right here. And let's see here. So I'm looking at the body radio button. So what I'm going to do now, because I know there's something slightly off about the styling, I may have, oh, class name, that could be it right there. That's not it right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look now, because this does happen. I'm going to move that to the side here, and I'm going to do a Control F, and I'm just going to search for radio. And so I have the, going to minimize this here, or at least collapse that. So I have the body radio wrapper, which is good right here, but I have the body radio button here. Okay, that's fine. Let me go to the next radio-esque thing. I have another wrapper, and I have another wrapper, but I knew I had something that had to do with the you know, the category stuff here. So let me come back into my old project here. And okay, so I have a class name, so I'm putting everything in a div called category container. All right, so I have the body radio button right here. And yes, this does ring a bell. So if I do category container, this should smooth that out. And okay, that's pretty cool. Font could be, you know, a little better, a little different, a little bigger, but like I said, you could go in and switch up the CSS how you want. So now I'm going to close the app.css, and as I inspect over this now, this thing should work, because if you notice, we are pulling this in right here. It says click that button, and so what I'm going to do first is do a like a random, right? A random joke. So I'm going to get a joke, and if it's extremely explicit, because I do like to make my 25 cents off these videos I make, I'll just censor it. And I have to censor this one because there is some crude language in it, but it just worked. So let's go to let's click dev, and we'll click joke, and it says Chuck Norris's database has only one table, kick, which he drops frequently. Money, we're going to click get joke, and then we get this joke in here. And yeah, this is how you could translate your Chuck Norris website from, you know, a standard responsive website into React. You could chop it up into pieces, and as you've seen here, once you go over this and do it yourself, get used to it, you're going to see that there's, you know, potentially areas where the body radio wrapper, you know, could be a component in and of itself, which we import into our app.js, you know, file here and do that. So it's cool because React allows you to chop stuff up in small, you know, bite-sized things and bring it together, and somehow it all cohesively works, which is cool. But if you like what I'm doing, like, share, subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next video.